On January 14, 2015, at 7:12 a.m., 24-year-old Megan Ellis stepped out of her apartment building in Buffalo, New York. She held a travel mug in one hand and her work badge in the other. The air was below freezing, lake-effect snow drifting sideways across the parking lot. Her car sat less than 100 yards away. It was a walk she had done hundreds of times before. This time, she never reached the driver's side door. 8 years later, detectives and neighbors still ask the same question. How does an adult vanish in open daylight between two cameras? Megan worked in medical billing at a downtown clinic. She lived on the city's north side, in a quiet complex just off Hurdle Avenue. She had moved there less than a year earlier, drawn by the short commute and the off-street parking. Security cameras covered the lobby, the elevator, and most of the lot. Investigators would later track her last confirmed image frame by frame. At 7:11 a.m., she exits the elevator alone. At 7:12, she passes through the glass front doors, bundled in a dark coat and winter boots. At 7:13, snow and glare wash out the lot camera. After that, there is nothing. Buffalo prides itself on being tough in winter. People here go to work in blizzards, dig out cars before dawn, and still keep schools and offices open. On that Wednesday morning, traffic moved, plows ran, and buses kept their schedule. No one reported hearing a scream in the lot. No car alarm sounded. Megan's Honda Civic stayed exactly where she had left it the night before, windshield crusted with ice. By 10 a.m., her desk at the clinic was still empty. Coworkers assumed weather or car trouble and kept going. At noon, her supervisor called her cell and went straight to voicemail. Her lunch sat untouched in the employee refrigerator. Around 3:30 p.m., a receptionist tried again and felt something was wrong. Megan never skipped a shift. She never ignored calls from work. That evening, her mother unlocked the apartment and stepped inside. When she saw her daughter's work shoes still by the door, the story of bad weather stopped making sense. Something else had taken those missing hours from Megan's day. Megan Ellis was born in 1990 in Rochester, New York, the only child of Linda and Paul Ellis. Her parents divorced when she was in high school, but they stayed in contact and shared holidays without drama. By 2014, Megan had finished a 2-year program in health information technology. She had taken a full-time job handling insurance claims and billing at a clinic in downtown Buffalo. Her supervisors described her as reliable, quiet, and organized. She almost never called in sick. Outside of work, Megan kept a small circle. She shared the Buffalo apartment with her mother, Linda, who had moved in after a knee surgery. Her father lived in Ohio, worked construction, and spoke with her by phone several times a week. Friends from college said Megan was the kind of person who answered texts quickly and kept track of everyone's birthdays. There were no recent breakups, no restraining orders, no active disputes. Her social media showed predictable patterns. Photos of her cat, grocery receipts, screenshots of weather alerts before big storms. Bank records later reviewed by detectives showed a steady income, regular rent, and student loan payments made on time. There were no large withdrawals, no secret credit cards, and no travel booked under her name. Coworkers at the clinic knew pieces of her routine. On Mondays and Wednesdays, she stayed late to cover the phones. On Fridays, she left exactly at 4:30 p.m. She took the number 5 bus home and stopped at the same corner store on Hurdle Avenue. She did not drink heavily, did not use drugs, and had no known gambling issues. If she worried about anything, she did not say it out loud at work. Linda later told detectives that Megan had started checking the front door lock twice each night. She shrugged it off as winter nerves and too many crime shows on television. For this channel, we look at cases like this carefully. An ordinary life can leave almost no obvious place for danger to enter. If you want to follow more long-form investigations into disappearances and cold files across the country, you can subscribe so you do not miss the next case. In the weeks before January 14th, one detail in Megan's routine changed. The people closest to her did not recognize its importance. In late December 2014, Megan asked her supervisor for a schedule change. A coworker left, and the clinic needed someone on an earlier shift. Starting in January, Megan began clocking in at 7:45 a.m. instead of 9 o'clock. That meant leaving the apartment just after 7:10, when the lot was still half empty and the sky over Buffalo was barely light. It was the first time in years she kept a regular route in the dark 5 days a week. On Wednesday, January 14th, Megan's phone alarm went off at 6:20 a.m. Cell records show she opened a weather app at 6:23, checking lake effect warnings for Erie County. At 6:41, she sent a brief text to a coworker about a claim they had been fighting with an insurance company. Linda later told detectives they spoke in the kitchen around 6:50. Megan poured coffee into her stainless steel mug, grabbed her badge, and mentioned the lot was slick again. Linda watched her daughter zip a black parka, pull on gloves, and slip her work shoes into a tote. Megan had asthma and usually carried an inhaler. That morning, it stayed on the counter. At the clinic, Megan's supervisor expected her for a training call with the billing software company at 8 a.m. At 7:46, the time clock showed no badge swipe. At 8:05, her computer login was still inactive. At 9:12, the supervisor called Megan's cell and reached voicemail. She tried again at 10:01 and 11:27 with the same result. Around noon, she emailed Linda using an address listed in HR records, asking if Megan was ill. Linda finished a shift at a grocery store and checked her phone in the break room. It was 3:02 p.m. There were missed calls from the clinic and the unanswered email. She called Megan and got voicemail. By 3:40, she had convinced a friend to drive her to the apartment complex. Megan's Honda was in its assigned space, still covered in a hard crust of snow and ice. There were no footprints around the driver's side door. Building staff helped Linda call Buffalo police to request a welfare check. When detectives pulled Megan's phone records later, one detail stood out. At 9:02 a.m., her phone connected, just once, to a tower miles south of the parking lot. Patrol officers from Buffalo Police arrived at the Ellis apartment building just after 4:10 p.m. on January 14, 2015. They checked the unit first. Megan's coat was gone, but her inhaler and a small cross pendant she usually wore sat on the kitchen counter. Her work tote bag was missing. Her wallet and car keys were not. When officers went back downstairs, they found her gray Honda Civic in its assigned spot, sealed under a thin layer of ice and road salt. Because Megan was an adult with no documented mental health history, the first written report used the phrase, missing person, possible voluntary. That changed within hours. By 6:30 p.m., detectives had confirmed with the clinic that she never clocked in, never logged onto her computer, and never called out. They pulled her phone records in real time and saw no outgoing activity after the early morning texts. To them, the problem was obvious. Weather, routine, and evidence at the scene all argued against a choice to disappear. At 8:15 p.m., the department's homicide unit joined the case. Officers canvassed every floor of the building, knocking on doors and asking residents if they had seen or heard anything between 7 o'clock and 7:30 a.m. A handful reported hearing car doors and scraping shovels in the lot. No one reported a struggle or a scream. The front lobby camera footage was preserved. The lot camera, partially blinded by snow, was flagged for enhancement by state crime lab technicians. By 10 p.m., local TV stations aired Megan's photo and basic description. 24 years old, 5'5", brown hair to her shoulders. Last seen leaving her building near Hurdle Avenue, wearing a black parka and dark boots. Viewers were asked to call a dedicated tip line that went live overnight. Within the first 12 hours, more than 100 calls came in. Most were vague sightings. A few would later matter. Overnight, supervisors marked search grids around the complex and the highway section where her phone briefly pinged. They asked New York State Police for technical help and possible air support. At roll call just after dawn, patrol cars and detectives were assigned sectors. The first full-scale search for Megan began in the dark, before the city's morning commute. What they missed in those first passes would shape the entire case. By the morning of January 15, 2015, search teams were working the grids around Megan Ellis's apartment and the stretch of Route 219 where her phone had briefly pinged. Patrol officers walked ditches and checked snowbanks. Detectives reviewed new tips as they came in. Most went nowhere. One did not. Shortly after 11 a.m., a public works employee in West Seneca, a suburb south of Buffalo, noticed a canvas tote sitting in the slush near a guardrail. The spot was just off an on-ramp that fed directly into the city. At first, he assumed it had fallen from someone's car. When he picked it up, papers and a plastic badge sleeve spilled onto the shoulder. The badge had a photo and a name he recognized from the local news alerts the night before. It was Megan's clinic identification card. He called his supervisor, then 911. Officers from West Seneca secured the scene and contacted Buffalo police. Within an hour, detectives from the missing person case were standing over the open bag. Inside, they found Megan's stainless steel travel mug, a pair of black knit gloves, and several folded billing statements from the clinic. There was also one of her work shoes, the left flat she usually changed into after driving. Her phone was not inside. Her wallet and car keys, already logged at the apartment, were still with Buffalo detectives. The location disturbed investigators. The tote lay less than half a mile from the cell tower that had registered Megan's phone at 9:02 a.m. on the day she vanished. Tire impressions in the dirty snow suggested a vehicle had pulled onto the shoulder and stopped briefly. No long drag marks, no obvious signs of a struggle. Whoever left the bag had done it quickly. Crime scene technicians photographed and collected the tote and its contents. They swabbed the handle, the mug, and the badge for possible DNA. They noted a faint chemical smell on the fabric, similar to household cleaner. That odor had not been reported in Megan's apartment. For the first time, police had proof Megan had been moved away from her home. They also had one item in the bag that none of her family could explain. 6 days after Megan Ellis vanished, on January 20th, 2015, a maintenance crew from Erie County was clearing brush along Buffalo Creek near West Seneca. It was late morning, temperatures just above freezing, and the snowpack along the waterline had started to collapse into dirty layers of ice and mud. One worker noticed a black contractor bag wedged against a cluster of branches a few feet from the bank. It looked heavier than trash usually left by the current. When he tried to move it with a rake, the plastic tore. A pale shape was visible through the gap. He stopped, backed away, and called his supervisor. At 11:19 a.m., 911 received a report of a suspicious bag with possible human remains. West Seneca officers arrived within minutes, taped off the area, and requested detectives and crime scene technicians. Buffalo police were notified as soon as the words "female victim" came over the radio. The bag was carefully cut open at the scene. Inside were the remains of an adult woman, clothed in dark pants and a long-sleeve top. Technicians noted a single black flat, shoe still on one foot, matching the type Megan's co-workers said she wore. Jewelry items were collected, including a simple silver ring and small stud earrings. A second, smaller plastic bag inside held a tangle of fabric and tape. The odor of cleaning agents was obvious to everyone standing close. The creek site sat less than 2 miles from the guardrail where Megan's work tote had been found 5 days earlier. Tire impressions along the maintenance access path suggested a vehicle had driven in at some point after the last heavy snowfall. There were no footprints preserved well enough to plaster cast. No obvious drag marks connected the access road to the water's edge. Whoever brought the bag had worked quickly and chosen a spot they believed would eventually flood in the spring. The medical examiner's office took custody of the remains shortly after 1 p.m. That evening, dental records confirmed what detectives and family already feared. The body in the bag was Megan Ellis. The official manner of death was listed as homicide. The cause was neck compression with associated injuries. One item recovered from the bag did not match Megan's belongings and could not be traced to her home. 8 months before Megan Ellis disappeared, another woman had reported an attack not far from where Megan's tote was later found. On May 28, 2014, at about 6:45 p.m., 32-year-old Danielle Price was jogging along a paved trail near Cazenovia Creek in South Buffalo. It was still light out. People were walking dogs and pushing strollers. Danielle told police she had taken the same route 3 times a week for years. As she passed under a line of trees near a parking lot, someone grabbed her from behind. A cloth pressed hard over her nose and mouth. She smelled a sharp chemical odor and felt her legs go weak. The man dragged her toward the brush, saying nothing. Danielle managed to twist her head and bite down on his hand. He loosened his grip long enough for her to scream. A car door slammed in the lot. The attacker let go and ran. Danielle went to the hospital that night. Nurses collected her clothing and swabbed areas where she said the man had grabbed her. She described him as a white male, medium height, average build, wearing dark clothes and a hood. She had not seen his face clearly. There was no sexual assault, no robbery. Her phone and keys were still in her pocket when she reached the parking lot. Buffalo police opened a case, and entered a partial DNA profile from the swabs into CODIS, the national database. No hits came back. The report stayed active for several weeks, then moved to a lower priority list. Officers increased patrols near the trail for a time. Public warnings were limited to a short notice about a suspicious incident. After Megan's body was recovered, the Erie County Forensic Lab compared evidence from both files. On an item of tape inside the contractor bag, analysts found a male DNA profile. It was stronger and more complete than the older sample from Danielle's case. When they ran the new profile, the system linked it to the partial profile from the 2014 jogger attack. The same unknown man had now escalated from a failed assault to a homicide. Danielle only learned that fact when detectives knocked on her door again in February 2015. When the lab confirmed the shared DNA profile between Megan Ellis and Danielle Price, the tone of the investigation changed. Detectives now had proof that a single unknown man had attacked one woman and killed another within a year. Buffalo police asked the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit for help building a profile. The Bureau suggested a white male in his 20s or 30s, local, with a history of social isolation and escalating behavior. Inside the department, there was disagreement about how the earlier jogger case had been handled. Some detectives believed it should have been labeled an attempted abduction from day one. Others pointed to limited details, no robbery, and a heavy caseload as reasons it stayed low priority. In internal emails later obtained by reporters, one supervisor admitted patrols at the trail had been scaled back after only a few weeks. The handling of physical evidence also came under review. During the first week of the Megan investigation, officers had collected voluntary DNA samples from dozens of men who lived near her building or worked along Route 219. The lab returned most results as no match. One sample, however, was logged with an empty envelope and a handwritten note reading insufficient swab. In the electronic case file, that entry was mistakenly coded the same as a negative result. Public pressure grew rapidly after Megan's body was found. At a community meeting in late January, residents demanded to know whether a serial offender was active in Erie County. Command staff confirmed the DNA link, but refused to share details about the condition of Megan's remains. They urged people to watch for sudden changes in behavior among neighbors, co-workers, or family members after January 14th. Investigators studied surveillance video from businesses near the creek and the highway on-ramp. They flagged several dark-colored SUVs and pickup trucks that appeared near both dump sites within the right time frames. None had clearly visible plates. Detectives also revisited the mysterious item found in the bag with Megan's body. It was a small metal pendant depicting a stylized cross and circle design. Linda confirmed it had never belonged to her daughter. Danielle said she recognized the shape from somewhere, but could not place it. Someone in Buffalo had seen that exact pendant before. Detectives decided to release a photograph of the small metal pendant to the public. On February 10, 2015, Buffalo police held a press conference and showed a close-up image on local TV. Tip line operators were told to log any call that mentioned jewelry, creek trails, or dark SUVs. Within 24 hours, one call stood out. A woman from West Seneca told dispatchers she believed she had seen the same design before. Her name was Carol Jensen, and she lived in a townhouse complex less than 3 miles from Buffalo Creek. Carol said her neighbor's adult son wore an almost identical pendant on a chain. She remembered it because the cross and circle symbol looked unusual, and he wore it even with t-shirts and sweatpants. The neighbor's son was 27-year-old Ethan Cole. He lived with his mother in a unit backing onto a wooded strip near the creek. He took classes in funeral service education at a local community college and worked part-time stocking supplies for a crematory equipment company. His online posts, later reviewed by detectives, showed a long-standing interest in death investigation and crime scene photography. Patrol officers first made contact with Ethan on February 13th. He agreed to come to the station for a voluntary interview. In the recorded session, Ethan said he had been home on January 14th, working on an online quiz. He denied ever seeing Megan Ellis and said he did not recognize Danielle's name. When asked about the pendant, he said he had lost his months earlier. At the end of the interview, Ethan signed a consent form and provided a buccal swab for DNA comparison. The sample was placed into a labeled envelope and sent to the Erie County lab with dozens of others. On paper, Ethan became one more cooperative neighbor who had nothing to hide. The detective who walked him back to the lobby noted nothing alarming in his demeanor. Back at the lab, a technician opened Ethan's envelope and found the swab container empty. The error was marked as insufficient sample. In the database used by the task force, that field displayed the same as no match. For the next several months, no one realized the difference. Ethan Cole's name moved to the bottom of a long list that was supposed to keep the city safe. For months after Megan Ellis was found, the task force kept working leads that went nowhere. The unknown DNA profile sat in Cody's with no name attached. The empty swab envelope from Ethan Cole was still coded as no match. On paper, he looked cleared. In reality, his profile had never been tested. The break did not come from the lab. It came from a television story. On March 3, 2015, a local station aired a segment on the Megan case. The reporter mentioned, for the first time, that the same man had attacked a jogger the year before. The piece also repeated the FBI's warning that the offender almost certainly lived in the Buffalo area. Neighbors watching at home heard the phrase, forensic evidence, and link between two cases. That same night, at a townhouse near West Seneca, Ethan Cole told his mother he felt sick. His mother, Janet Cole, later said he could not sit still. He paced the living room and turned the TV off and on. At about 10:30 p.m., he told her there was something he needed to say. She asked if it had to do with that girl on the news. He answered yes. According to her statement, he then admitted he was responsible for what happened to Megan and for the attack on the runner. Janet did not sleep. Shortly after 6 a.m. on March 4th, she picked up the phone and dialed 911. The call lasted nearly 15 minutes. In it, she told the dispatcher that her adult son wanted to turn himself in for the Creek murder. When the dispatcher asked if there were remains or evidence in the home, Janet said there were items in the basement that might belong to Megan. Officers arrived at the Cole residence within minutes. Ethan waited in the front room with his hands visible. He did not resist when they handcuffed him. At headquarters, he waived his right to an attorney and agreed to an interview. Over several hours, he described watching Megan in the parking lot, grabbing her near her car, and driving her to the townhouse. He admitted to restraining her and causing her death, but he denied any sexual motive. That afternoon, prosecutors charged Ethan Cole with second-degree murder, kidnapping, and attempted murder in Danielle Price's case. In his first court appearance, he entered a plea that stunned Megan's family. At his first appearance in Erie County Court, Ethan Cole stood in an orange jumpsuit and entered a plea of not guilty. This was on March 6, 2015. For Megan Ellis's family, that decision cut against everything they had just been told by detectives. They had heard about his detailed confession, his description of the parking lot, the tote, and the bag at Buffalo Creek. Now, in the formal record, he was denying all of it. Prosecutors filed a long list of charges. Second-degree murder for Megan's death. First-degree kidnapping. Attempted kidnapping and attempted murder for the attack on Danielle Price. There were also counts related to unlawful restraint and evidence tampering. The district attorney's office announced they would seek the maximum possible sentence under New York law. Ethan's defense team submitted early notices that they might pursue a mental health strategy. They pointed to his long fixation on death, his work around cremation equipment, and childhood behavioral problems. They ordered neurological testing and raised questions about possible head injuries from an earlier car accident. None of this changed one basic fact. The DNA profile from tape in the contractor bag matched Ethan's new sample exactly. As pretrial hearings began, a separate internal review inside Buffalo Police exposed the lab error. The empty swab envelope, coded as no match, had carried Ethan's name. Detectives learned that he should have been flagged as a high-priority suspect weeks earlier. The department admitted the mistake in a short statement, calling it a breakdown in evidence handling. For Megan's parents, that sentence never felt like enough. By late summer 2016, as jury selection approached, the defense quietly shifted strategy. On September 12th, Ethan Cole withdrew his not guilty plea and entered guilty pleas to all major counts. There was no deal on sentencing. In November, the judge imposed a term of 40 years to life for Megan's murder, plus additional consecutive years for the other charges, effectively ensuring he would never leave prison. Ethan declined to speak when given the chance in court, staring straight ahead as the judge read the sentence. In the next and final phase of this case, the focus moved away from Ethan and back to the people who had to live with what he did. When the sentence was handed down in November 2016, the legal part of the case ended quickly. Ethan Cole was transferred to a maximum security prison downstate. He would not be eligible to see a parole board until he was an old man, if ever. For Megan Ellis's family, that did not feel like closure. It felt like the moment when everyone else moved on. Linda left the North Buffalo apartment within a year. She could not walk past the parking lot where her daughter vanished. She moved to a smaller place in Amherst and kept Megan's belongings in storage bins. Megan's father, Paul, drove in from Ohio for the hearings and then returned to work. He later said most of his life split into before 2015 and after 2015, with very little in between. Danielle Price, the runner who survived, agreed to speak publicly only once. In a local interview, she described the guilt she felt learning that her attacker had gone on to kill someone else. Detectives told her they did not believe anything she did or did not do changed what happened to Megan. Danielle started a small safety group that met near the same trail, teaching women how to use their instincts and report suspicious behavior early. Buffalo and West Seneca officials approved a memorial near the creek where Megan's body was found. In 2018, a small garden and bench were installed overlooking the water. A plaque lists Megan's name, birth year, and the date she disappeared. On the opposite side, there is a short message about community responsibility and calling in tips. One of the most concrete changes grew out of Linda's frustration with delays in those first hours. With the help of advocates and a state legislator, she pushed for a rapid notification program for missing adults. The result was a pilot system that allowed families to trigger neighborhood-level alerts by text and email when someone over 18 vanished under suspicious circumstances. It was not as strong as an Amber Alert, but it was faster than waiting for a press conference. Janet Cole never visited her son in prison. She said she could not reconcile the person she raised with the person described in court. She has expressed regret and apology to Megan's family, but they have kept their distance. Today, the file on Megan's case is marked closed, but its lessons continue to surface every time another adult goes missing without a trace.